You're watching On Point. We continue our discussion on the state of South Africa's aviation sector. Professor Tshepo Mongalo, who's a law professor at IIE MSA University, joins me in studio now. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Talk to us generally about governance at state-owned enterprises with a particular focus on aviation and what the state of that is.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you as well and the viewers. Yeah, well, insofar as governance is concerned of SOEs, we must understand that one thing that we must be careful of is that the law, particularly the Companies Act, which requires that the business and management of the company should be led by the board of the directors, can be damaged if there is any interference of any sort from the political forces or from any governmental authorities. And to the extent that the board is given a leeway to run a state-owned enterprise and with no interference, then the threat of corruption and the threat of any undue interference can be minimized. And I think that SOEs must be left to run and manage the business and affairs of their organizations with less interference from government, but with more emphasis on skilled executives and directors who can be able to steer the state-owned enterprises in the way in which they can be profitable and even advance the developmental state objectives.
Okay, let's go to SAA. Using an example now, Advocate Vusi Pukoli is there. Will his previous roles assist him to do what you've just spoken about, particularly when it comes to breaches of governance and corruption, possible corruption within SAA?
I think the appointment of the Chief Risk and Compliance Officer at SAA is very important, particularly given the problems that they have been going through. But my view is that his skills are actually needed, particularly in line with the fact of the need to restructure the business model, and therefore his contribution in the executive is going to be very important in realizing what is profitable and what are the risks that the organization can enter into, and what compliance issues are at risk of making the organization to be unsustainable. I am just concerned about his background in politics as to whether that is not going to be something that will infiltrate into the SAA, and if it does, then we'll be continuing with a situation where we see interference of political forces in the state-owned enterprises, and then there will still going to be issues of whether the board and the executives are being independent of the executive and independent of the government generally. And as a result, that is one thing that state-owned enterprises should be allowed to advance without any interference from political side. I'm not saying that Mr. Pukoli will bring in the political element in the SAA, but given his background, I wonder if he will be able to then clear himself of any potential perceived and even real threat of the political environment being part and parcel of the SAA going forward.
Okay. Let's stay with the SAA. We know that they had funds allocated to it from our contingency reserves, but our finance minister, speaking last year, was quite clear that, one, he doesn't want a constant bailouts of state-owned enterprises, including SAA. And then he also said there's no reason for SAA and we can get rid of it. Is it possible to get rid of SAA? What other models could be used then to deal with our national carrier?
Well, I think the one that people are talking about is the issue of privatization, but I don't think that privatization is within the horizon at the moment. But what I can say is the liberalization of the aviation industry may be on the horizon, in the sense that, incrementally, you may see, the parts of the aviation industry being allowed to be in the private space, where even the things that were usually within the domain of our national carrier, the SAA, actually been done by the private sector, with the result of liberalization and ultimately liberalization of the aviation industry, just like the liberalization of any entity that was previously within exclusive government domain, can actually lead to competition within the industry that may ultimately lead to collaboration between the state-owned enterprises together with the private sector, with a view to ultimately seeing that competition propelling even the state-owned enterprises running like private entities, and therefore leading to a more competitive environment consisting of state-owned enterprises and private entities at the same time. And liberalization is where we should be going.
Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Professor Tshepo Mongalo, law professor at IIE MSA University, joining me in studio there to discuss the state of the aviation sector in South Africa with a particular focus on governance.